story out of yesterday, of course, the Antisemitism report which was handed down. Australia's Antisemitism Envoy has told the Albanese government to strip funding from universities, charities and cultural institutions that fail to combat hatred against Jewish people. Peter Wertheim is co-CEO of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry and is with me on the line now. Peter, good morning.
Good morning.
Now, does this go far enough, do you think?
I think the plan is a comprehensive one, and it's sector by sector. It also has education as its basic theme.
Yeah.
So it does seem to me to be a very well-conceived plan. We supported it because it does align very much with our own thinking and what we ourselves have called for. So I do think it's an adequate plan. Obviously, it will depend on implementation to see whether it does the job.
What about penalties? What about sentencing and all this sort of thing? I mean, we've still got the case of the shocking case which started all this off, basically, of the Opera House in Sydney, on the steps of the Opera House. I don't think anybody's ever got. Has anybody ever been charged with that?
No, nobody was ever charged for that, and that is a standing disgrace for our whole nation. I mean, that particular event attracted worldwide notice. It was in the media everywhere at the time, and it was, I think, an uncharacteristically negative reflection on Australia as a tolerant and fair-minded nation. But the fact that nobody's ever been brought to account and that the laws remain inadequate to deal with a situation like that, nobody has suggested that any of the law reforms that have occurred since then would be sufficient to meet a situation like that, means that the stigma of that event still affects us.
Yeah, I can see it being sort of two-pronged, I guess, Peter, that, you've got the institutions like universities and cultural bodies, even broadcasters, expected to uphold consistent standards and demonstrate accountability in fighting anti-Semitism. But you've got you've got two things. You've got the hate speech and this sort of thing, which, as we know, there was the case with the Sydney Opera House. But then again, you've got people going around firebombing synagogues and all this sort of thing. That's serious, if not more serious, because that's really making a statement, isn't it?
Well, that is criminal behaviour, pure and simple, and you don't need new laws or any special laws to acknowledge that. Firebombing any institution, particularly a place of worship, and particularly when it's motivated by racial or religious hatred, has always been an offence, and in fact an aggravated offence if it's motivated in that way. But then you have a gradation of what I might call anti-Semitic behaviours. The one you pointed to and the Opera House events are among the more extreme of them. But there's a spectrum, if I can put it that way, of anti-Semitic behaviours. Some of them much more subtle, much more insidious, as we've seen within universities, within the arts and culture sector, and so on. And this is what this comprehensive plan is designed to address, because so far nobody's come up with any answers to that particular problem in those particular sectors. And it does, I think, come back to education. I mean, the plan does recommend that funding be withdrawn as a last resort, where you have institutions that are persistent offenders and refuse to take their head out of the sand and address real problems that have been identified of anti-Semitism within their organisations. But the main focus of this plan, I think, is the correct one, which is prevention in the form of education. Yeah,
I think you hit the nail on the head with the proposition that nothing is being, or the laws aren't strong enough to be able to handle it. In other words, the sentencing or the consequences. The consequences aren't there, and they don't seem to be. If they are policed, they don't seem to go too far.
Well, indeed, and in fact, my organisation had to recently bring a case in the federal court against a particular preacher, a religious preacher, who was spouting anti-Semitic tropes in a number of speeches. Again, we looked to the authorities to take action to deal with that. Again, action was lacking. There were complaints by the authorities that they didn't have sufficient powers, the laws are inadequate. Whatever the excuses were, the ultimate effect was that it was giving a free pass to that kind of behaviour. So in the end, we took civil action ourselves in the federal court, and the judgment came down last week, and fortunately it went our way, and our complaint was upheld, and certain orders have been made to prohibit that particular individual and that particular organisation from repeating the behaviour in the future.
Yeah, but you shouldn't have to go that far. You shouldn't have to do that.
Well, indeed, and we made that point at the time, that it's really not for citizens who pay their taxes to have to guarantee their own security. This is something that we look to government and law enforcement to do as part of our social contract.
Well, a couple of points I've made this morning, one in particular I've made it a couple of times, is my belief that this is about 2 years too late.
Well, yes, I think that's a fair point, because this problem really became obvious and sprang to the surface in the wake of the Hamas attacks in Israel on the 7th of October, and the surge of sympathy that was expressed not for the victims of those attacks, but for the terrorists who were perpetrating them. I mean, this is a perverse turn of events, and it reflects something perhaps even more deeply troubling in our civilization. That anti-Semitism is merely the tip of the iceberg, and what's going on beneath that that's giving rise to it it's symptomatic of some deeper malaise.
Well, let's hope this one goes some way towards alleviating some of that. But Peter, we'll have to leave it there for this morning, but all the best, and I do thank you for your time today.
Thank you.